this is one of the biggest challenges that some of the most successful people that I know have is successful relationships. And it's not just with their spouse or partner, it could be just with their children, with their family. This is life changing. And if you do what you're teaching, it could really make a difference.
I've got some great examples. I had a gentleman come in, very, very successful guy, media guy. And he said to me, he said, I'm going through a very nasty divorce. He says, we're going to be going into mediation. He says, but I also love your performance part of it. I want to perform better. So I'm really coming to you for performance, but I'm also so stressed out about this divorce and the mediation I'm going through. So I take him through the program. He absolutely loves it. And he said, even the people like on the shows that he was on were saying, you're so much calmer. Like you just nailed that interview. It was really good. So he says, from that side of it, it really helped me. And then he called me the day before. He says, I got the mediation tomorrow. Got any ideas, any thoughts for me before I go through it? And I said, just do the tools that we taught you, right? And you'll be fine. He calls me the next day and he said, would you be willing to speak to my wife? And I said, sure. I said, what's up? He says, I sat in the mediation across from her and couldn't remember why I was divorcing her. He says, I thought I hated her. I didn't hate her. I loved her. But all my trauma had such an impact on me, I was taking it out on her. And I created all this anger and frustration. He goes, and I realized I loved this woman. I couldn't come up with a reason why I was divorcing her. And so they're back together. And that
So
was from the worst mediation and divorce that he told me how bad it's going to be to literally realizing he had no anger, no hatred in his heart. And then I had another one that's really interesting, which is the reversal of that on a positive, though. So she had a lot of trauma. The husband knew about what I did, loved it, said, I'm going to send my wife in. I know she's got a lot of trauma. It definitely improved their relationship. And so he was very happy about that. But then she ended up wanting a divorce. And what he said to me is, he says, she realized that she didn't marry me because she loved me. She married me because I was secure. And she never had security and safety. So he became her safe place, but she wasn't in love with him. And so they ended up divorcing. He's now married to his college, or getting married to his college sweetheart, right? And they have a great relationship. So it turned out really positive, but the relationship wasn't what she was really looking for.
it's so interesting. I mean, it's amazing how trauma impacts so many levels of your life, whether it's the anxiety you feel in work, whether it's, where you say you're not sabotaging, but a lot of people will say they're self-sabotaging themselves in the careers. Every time they get a chance to go to the next level, they tend to blow it up. And I know you work with a lot of professionals in sports and major performers, and you find that working with them in on these things can help them break through, right? Because that's a really big challenge. They kind of hit that wall and it's almost like they need something to help them break through. And just working through this diagnostic is something that will guide them when they hit those moments.
It's amazing. So on the psychological side, it's a obvious one. So I work with professional athletes. If they're dealing with, a trauma from earlier in their life, it will have an effect. It could be a trauma from their sport. So they could have. I had one guy who's a runner. He's an Olympic runner, and he tore his knee up on a turn. And then what he said is they're timing him, and every time he gets to one of those turns, he pulls back a little bit and didn't know why, right? But because his mind was looping through, this is where we get hurt, and was seeing it in real time. And so once you get that out of the way, it makes a major impact. But the other area that I talk about is that it actually affects the mitochondria, the energy in the cell. And people aren't aware of that. So I've got all kinds of examples of people, as long as the trauma loop is running, it's pulling power. and that power is going to affect performance. So after people have gone through the program, they start making personal bests and don't know why. So one that's a really interesting one is a gentleman, Marco Cisetto. And Marco was a double amputee. He lost both his legs to a suicide attempt, and he was a marathon runner from Kenya. So they built him prosthetics to walk on and blades to run on again. But they called me up and said he's plateaued. He's not improving no matter how much work we're doing with him. Like it seems to he's hit a peak level. Can you take him through the process and see if you can improve his times? So Marco came in to see me. 9 days later, runs in a marathon and takes 15 seconds per mile off his time.
Wow.
And then a month later, runs in the Boston Marathon and breaks the world record for marathoners with amputations. And then 2 months later, runs in the Chicago Marathon, breaks his own world record by another 5 minutes, and gets signed by Nike. And what I said to him, I said, Marco, I didn't make you faster. You were always that fast. You didn't have access to that power. And so I worked with a group that worked with professional athletes, and I took them through the sort of program showing them how this can improve performance. And the one guy said to me, he goes, you just blew my mind. He says, we work with these professional world top athletes and never understood why they would go into a sympathetic nervous system response when they were at rest because they're monitoring them constantly. He says, you're telling me that's the trauma loop? I said, yeah. He goes, we never understood that. It made no sense to us why their system would go into that active sympathetic response when they're doing nothing. Now they got it. So these are the best in the world at their sport and are still dealing with it. Imagine what happens when you eliminate that stress response.
It's a release, huh? It's literally like a release of that negative energy that's just continuously holding you back. Uh,
And even
it's
high performers, the best in the world, still have another gear. And so all you have to do is help them get to that next gear. And again, I never take the credit for them being better athletes. I just say, I just helped you access what you didn't have access to, but you've always had it within you. So I'm not making them faster. I'm making their potential right there so that they can reach their potential.
Yeah, it's really amazing. And with athletes, it's no different than people in work and high performers. They we see it all the time in leadership. I can't tell you how many performance reviews I've done where part of it is, I see this amazing talent. I see this human that has so much potential, and I know and believe in you, but I can't believe in you enough for you to achieve these things. You have to achieve these things. And that you could see them struggling with those with that very flip of a conversation where they're like, I just don't know what I need to be doing. And we know what they need to do. There's probably just something that they have to release. There's something that they need to work through to help them really accomplish that next level.
And those emotional concussions that we talked about earlier can sometimes do that. And in the book I wrote, here are 10 things that successful people don't do, as opposed to saying, here's what successful people do. Why are you procrastinating? So I had a lady come in, very successful entrepreneur, doing really well, but she says, well, I procrastinate all the time. And so she says, I just feel like I work better under pressure. And I said, no, you don't. Nobody does. Right. And so she said, but I don't know where the procrastination came from. And so when we look back, her mother was the principal at the school she went to. And she explained to me, she says, I remember when I was doing my homework, my mother would have me come into her office. She would look at my homework. She says, I remember that red pen. She'd take out this red pen and start underlining all my mistakes. And so as we look through it, is her mind didn't want to be criticized. So the longer if her mother got really busy, she didn't have time to do it. So if she could push it off, she avoided the hurt. Her mother wasn't trying to hurt her, but she was taking it, I'm not measuring up to what my mother wants. I'm getting too many things wrong. And so because she was her own boss, right, she could push things off the last minute. Nobody could then override her or tell her what she did wrong.
If you like clips like this, I have a similar clip here, And if you want to watch the full video, click here.